Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening or this morning, wherever you are. We have our global show. So I know some of you are in Hong Kong or Singapore. So anyhow, really appreciate you joining us today. We've got a wonderful guest speaker who is a venture capitalist, an angel investor, and he has international experience. He has serial entrepreneur experience, investing experience, and we'll get to hear a lot more from him in a minute. So just a few words about Silicon Dragon Ventures. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we have all of these content elements, including our videos, our mobile app, our newsletter, and WeChat, and YouTube, and so forth, and Zoom, which we started when COVID hit. We took all of our events, which were going around the world, then took them online. So it's a whole new world out there today for Silicon Dragon Ventures. In the meantime, during COVID, I wrote another book, which will be coming out. And there's a little hint of it here on the slide for those of you who can see that. And I'll be sharing more details about that new book soon. But anyhow, 3 books already and a 4th one to come. So please sign up for the Circle membership. I know many of you are already Circle members, and I really appreciate that because that's the way we're able to hold these events, so thank you very much. Now, finally, I'd like to introduce our featured guest, Nihal Mehta from Eniac Ventures. And hi, Nihal, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Good, good. So sorry for that long preamble, but just want to set the stage here. So Nihal and I know one another from Silicon Valley, and he's actually been at one of our on a panel at one of our Silicon Valley events way back. And I've been following the progress of Eniac Ventures for quite some time, and it's been really impressive. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So let me just say a few things about Eniac Ventures. Okay, what the hell does Eniac mean? So I had to look it up. And there it is, electronic numerical integrator and computer. So what led you to call it that anyhow?
Yeah, it was interesting. In college, ENIAC, that original computer, was the world's first automated computer. It was built in the 1940s at the University of Pennsylvania. And so actually right now they have parts of it, still at the school, and then parts of it in the Smithsonian. But we all had ENIAC email addresses in college. So I was nihal@eniac.upenn.edu. And so my partners Hadley, Vic, and Tim were the same. And so when we were starting a fund, we thought it'd be a really cool namesake because ENIAC was built at Penn. We were all engineers at Penn. ENIAC was in the engineering school at Penn, and we had ENIAC email addresses. So we started using the name, and then a few years in, we realized we should probably get approval from the dean, to continue using the name. And we went back there kind of with our tail between our legs, and the dean was messing with us. He said, "Sorry guys, you're gonna have to rename your firm," but he was joking. So we're now officially allowed to use the name Eniac Ventures, but that's where it came from.
Oh, okay. Well, in a way, it's great advertising for your university too.
That's right.
Yeah. So I, just doing some research on the firm. I know it was founded in 2010, and 4 engineering students there. And I guess before you ever think that you would, be raising a 5th fund, which apparently just closed at $125 million. Did you, in your wildest dreams back then, think that this thing would become so successful?
No, I mean, we just wrote about this last week. Last week, 11 years ago, we launched our first fund, and that was a whopping $1.6 million. So fund 1 was 1.6 million, in 2010. And
was the university an LP?
No, actually, and they still aren't. We ask them every fund cycle. Eventually they'll come around, but yeah, no, the first fund was actually just, kind of our money, friends. And it wasn't until Fund 3 that we're able to attract institutional investors. So now we have, you know, top university endowments, pension funds, foundations, fund of funds, of course, endowments I mentioned. So we're very lucky with our LP base today, but in the beginning it was, it was very hard, and it was literally, 10 and 15 and 20K checks, that we would cobble together from LPs.
Right, right. Well, University of Pennsylvania needs to get on the ball here. And okay, just a few other points about Eniac. You guys have been on a roll lately, particularly in New York with the newest unicorn, Alloy, and then 2 recent SPACs, Owlet and Box. And then InParticle raised 150 million at an $800 million valuation. And Attentive, is this right? 8 billion valuation?
It is. Yeah, that was actually, that's an older number. But anyway, that was what was publicly announced when they did that round. I believe that was their Series E, earlier this year.
I see. Wow. Okay, so valuations must be sky high. I don't know.
Yeah.
So a little bit about Nihal. Okay. I find it really interesting that you actually put this on your bio, that you had 2 companies, and that you also say, well, you have the, the triumphs and the scars of some failures. So 2 companies went bankrupt, right? Am I right about this? 2 of them didn't.
That's right. Actually, they were the same entity. Philly Tonight became Urban Groove, but yes, that went bankrupt.
Okay.
And that was a very humbling experience. That was in 2001.
Right.
And so I was, early 20s, very early in my startup journey. I always say, at the time it was like a humiliating event, but looking back, it was the best thing that happened in my career, because I think when you fail fast and come back from that, you develop this resilience and this grit that is actually one of the top qualities we look for today in other founders.
Sure. Well, that was a tough time, 2001. I remember it well.
Yeah.
We went through the dot-com boom, and then all of a sudden, boom, the bust, right?
Right.
A lot of startups failed. So why did your startup fail, do you think?
We had about, I think, close to $500,000 of debt on our balance sheet. And, the model back then, when, .com was a novel thing, was, to keep raising money, essentially 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, because revenues would not sustain a business. The business model for Urban Groove and Philly Tonight was online advertising. And this is, pre-Google. So it was not a scalable infrastructure to garner revenue from ad networks. Like, they didn't exist. And so it was a very manual process. We hired a sales team that would literally walk to bars and clubs and collect cash from restaurant owners, to buy ads on the site. But in any event, we had a bunch of debt on the balance sheet. We had very little revenue, and we were not able to raise money because 2001 was that epic crash. And so we had no option but to, unfortunately file for bankruptcy. The other good side effect, by the way, of that is I ended up buying the assets out of the bankruptcy, and that became my next company called Ipsh, which actually was successful. So that was acquired in 2005 by Omnicom in New York. And that was one of the first mobile marketing platforms. Actually, not dissimilar to Attentive. I mean, Attentive now 20 years later is kind of like Ipsh, like 100.0. But we were doing similar things. We were helping brands reach customers over text.
Okay, so you really did the pivot from online to mobile in that 5-year time.
That's right.
Yeah, no, yes, that was a quick pivot. Good for you. So beyond that, I think Nihal has proven his investing smarts with a number of companies that were acquired by big names like Google and Microsoft, and you can see them listed here. AdMock was one, SwiftKey was another. You've also invested in Uber. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Is it a good or bad thing at this point?
It was good because I got out when SoftBank bought us out. So it was a good thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good, good. Well, your personal side too is equally as fascinating. And I think people will really want to know a little bit more about what you're doing with, the disadvantaged youth in India and helping Main Street restaurants survive the pandemic and giving back to, Black communities. It's all amazing. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think, just high level, we started at HIMSA actually right after 9/11. The initial inspiration was to actually raise money for victims of all the horrible hate crimes that were happening in many brown communities across the country. And so we would basically, raise money to help a lot of the victims' families and raise money for awareness of these,
Okay.
horrible hate crimes. And then a few years into it, we realized that, a lot of the kind of systemic hate and racism is a function of, a lack of education and lack of awareness and understanding. And so we ended up finding schools in India and actually providing scholarships for many of the schools that had, that were essentially located very close to the slums. And so there's one school in particular in Gujarat. One of our co-founders in this charity has family in Ahmedabad. And we ended up basically creating an evergreen scholarship for a lot of these kids to basically pay for their entire school. So from kindergarten through college,
Mhm.
in hopes that, they can kind of, escape that immediate environment and really, fulfill their potential. But that is, it's still alive and well today, and that's called Project Ahimsa.
Okay. Do you have family still in India?
We do, yeah. I'd say my mom's two brothers are there with their kids, and about half of my dad's siblings are still there. So I have a ton of cousins all over India.
Do you go there often? I mean, probably not recently, but
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, at least once a year.
uh-huh.
Obviously have not gone now in 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Um, so, and then the co-founder of the Help Main Street, which is a good name, a restaurant to survive the pandemic. Is that New York or is that
Yeah,
where?
that's nationwide. So we realized at the beginning of the pandemic that a lot of our favorite restaurants were really being hit hard, and it was very
Yeah.
hard for many of them to survive. And by the way, many of them did not survive. I think probably all of us have lost some of their favorite restaurants across the country. But
Yeah.
we realized that the best way to give these entrepreneurs capital was through the concept of a gift card, which is essentially a no interest loan.
Okay.
And there wasn't a service that aggregated gift cards for restaurants across the country because they were very siloed and fragmented.
Mm-hmm.
Square has their own gift cards, for example, and there's 10 other types of large gift card platforms. And so all we did is roll them all up in one website. It's live today. It's been up for about a year and a half, helpmainstreet.com.
Uh-huh.
And you can find your restaurant and buy a gift card. And it goes, that cash goes straight to the owner.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
good.
yeah, we got that up in a couple of days, like at the very beginning of the pandemic.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, I've been in Manhattan for about the past month. Usually I'm working from Silicon Valley, but I was taking a break from Silicon Valley, and I've been in New York for about, well, more than a month now. And so exploring, it's actually New York City is my home base, but I don't spend as much time in New York as I do in Silicon Valley. But just the point I'm trying to make here is I've seen so many restaurants close, so many hotels close in Manhattan still. And yeah, it's good that you're helping them to get through this. And I do see the streets are starting to be a lot more active now.
Yeah, New York is back.
Yeah, the people are back. The commuters are not back, but maybe that will come. I don't know. That's one of the big changes, I think, with this whole COVID situation is
Yeah.
those who are in the burbs like to stay in the burbs.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about this 100K pledge?
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is interesting. I actually co-founded this with one of my best friends, BJ, who we also actually we co-founded Philly Tonight Urban Group together and Ahimsa together. So I've done a lot with this this guy. Essentially, after the murder of George Floyd last year, we noticed a lot of people in the tech industry and all across the board, but especially the tech industry, were making pledges, to provide some sort of, economic empowerment to Black communities. And, some organizations pledged billions. And we remember from, Rodney King and Trayvon Martin, even after some of these horrific events, there would be a lot of kind of lip service, and people would promise, big things and pledge big things. And oftentimes there was no follow-up or accountability against those pledges. And so the inspiration for the 100K pledge was, if a pledge is going to be publicly published, that we would add it to the website, and we would try to keep whoever made the pledge honest, so that this wouldn't be lip service, so that we could actually provide accountability and transparency on a public social record. And then we realized a lot of people actually also wanted to pledge, and they wanted to pledge to try to also help, and they could actually create a pledge. We gave them an interface to create a pledge on our website. And so you can go there today, the 100kpledge.com, and pledge to donate, to invest, to hire, from and into the Black community over the next 10 years. And your progress will be kind of tracked with a progress bar. And I think so far we've aggregated over 50 billion of pledges. And this website's going to be up for forever. And so it's kind of a nice little, function of accountability and transparency, for the world to kind of see how these pledges are being consummated.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's excellent, because there is such a need, and there's such a gap in our country between rich and poor. And traveling around the country over the past year and a half on several road trips, I really have seen it up close, and certain Rust Belt cities that have a large Black community or large Black population. Some of those areas are just devastated still, and COVID has not helped. But it's good that you're helping out. There's two people online who are saying hi to you. One is Kahu, Kahual. You know him?
Yep. Yeah, I just said hi. He's,
okay. And then there's another person who also mentioned that they know you. Christopher. Okay. Actually, Christopher has a good question. Let me ask this. So can you read it on the screen? I'll actually read it out for everybody. What is your take on the VC investment attitude towards dual use technologies? Do you think there's more interest in those technologies as the government looks to provide more funding for small businesses versus all these other acronyms here? AFWERX, space WERX, etc.
Sorry, I missed that. Could you repeat that? I can't see the question.
Oh, you can't see them? Yeah, it's
No.
under Q&A.
Okay. That's
From
probably the wrong
Christopher.
tab.
Do you
I
see
got
it
it.
now?
I got it now. Yep.
Okay,
Dual
yeah.
use technologies. Cool.
Yeah, so that's his question. So what do you think about the VC investment attitude towards dual use technologies? Do you think there's more of an interest in those technologies as the government looks to provide more funding for small businesses first through all those programs that the government has, like through the Air Force and the Space Force, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in general, high level, I mean, bulk of this innovation is being driven by the private sector, not the public sector. I think it's great that government's supporting a lot of these initiatives. I mean, I think a lot of the companies we backed and made a lot of money from are actually disrupting a lot of government. Uber is like a great example. But yes, like, high level, I think, I think there is more interest, for sure. But I still believe that all the innovations it's not coming out of the public sector, it's coming out of the private. So, it's going to take, we're not going to rely on the government to create innovation in any of these marketplaces. I mean, if you look at even space, obviously NASA, incredible pioneer, but everything we've done in the past 5 years, kind of take their gains and multiply them, has been done, in the private sector with regards to SpaceX. And we're doing similar things in the ocean. We have a company called Bedrock. That's kind of like the SpaceX for the seas, where we're mapping the entire ocean. We still can't do very basic things like predict the weather as humans, and a lot of that is because we actually don't know what 2/3 of our planet even looks like in terms of the ocean. So anyway, all this innovation is coming from the private sector, and much of it is funded by VCs.
Okay, and what's the sweet spot for your VC funding? Are there certain sectors that you really prefer over others?
Yeah, we're generalists, so we're writing. We're really focused on the stage, so we're seed investors, but we're pre-product market fit, which means there's a team, well-formed team. So kind of all the co-founders are on board. There's some sort of a product prototype, and there's a very big market. I'd say we're 90% about the team. So some of the lessons we learned in our career, is how we qualify, founders that we're potentially going to invest in. We love founders that are repeat entrepreneurs. We love founders that have failed before. We love founders that have maybe made a little bit of money before. We say they bought the house, but they're still paying the mortgage. But ideally, it's a serial founding team that failed together before, and they want to do it again together. That's where we've actually had the most success. Companies like Attentive, you mentioned, close to being a decacorn. Companies like Alloy, that raised at 1.35 billion last week. These are all teams of serial co-founders that actually did it before together, and this is their next chapter. And so they know how to work together. They've de-risked the co-founding relationship, and they have the muscle memory, to go bigger.
Right. So when you started the VC fund, had you ever done serial entrepreneurship with any of your co-founders?
Sorry, have we?
Yeah, when you started the fund, I know you had done a lot of startups. Actually, you did 5 startups. So you're really a serial entrepreneur turned venture capitalist. So with your founding team, were any of those serial entrepreneurs with you on any of your startups?
Yeah, I mean, many, I'd say, even fast forwarding to this year, we've done 10 investments, and 7 out of 10 are repeat founders.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's good. I think that's important. And it doesn't matter if they were successful or failure. It just means if they have some experience.
Yeah, they have experience, but like the serial co-founder relationship's interesting. I like to say, because startups are never a straight line, right? They're these dramatic roller coasters.
Yeah.
And I like to say that, if you had your hands around somebody else's neck in like the bad times, and you still want to work together again on your next startup, that means the world. And that's the top killer of early stage startups is co-founder chemistry. That's not, that's not working. And we've experienced that in our startups for sure, the ones we founded. And so that's one thing we really pay attention to.
Okay. There's a very specific question here about whether your team has any investments in 3D printing or SaaS, vertical markets.
Yeah, we've done a ton of vertical SaaS.
Okay.
My partner, Tim, actually, who's in San Francisco, loves it. So some of the companies that he drives, a company called Brightwheel, which is essentially scheduling and billing for early education. So think of it as like a mind body for like daycare and preschool. And that's vertical SaaS. Alloy, I mentioned earlier, is a API for KYC and AML for fintech. That's vertical SaaS. Another company called Brick, br.iq, is vertical SaaS for construction data and construction payments. So we love vertical SaaS. I mean, I think, you know, one of the themes that we're passionate about is kind of these old school, you know, $1 trillion GDP categories that are just ripe for disruption. And by the way, COVID helped accelerate a lot of that. But there's so much more to be done, right? And that's a ton of it's in fintech, ton of it's in healthcare, ton of it's in construction, ton of it's in real estate. So it's all over the place. So anyway, we love vertical SaaS. In terms of 3D printing, we do have a company called Fathom Optics. And what they do is they actually print 3D holograms and embellishments, I think is the word, on things like, you know, like beverages and packaging to give it a real 3D effect and a real ornament.
Okay.
And that's all algorithm based. So it's all algo based printing. And that company is called Fathom Optics.
Okay. How many startups do you have in your current portfolio and where are they geographically?
Yeah, I mean, Fund 5. So we've probably done about 150 companies across the 5 funds. You know, the Bay Area is still the plurality of the companies. You know, tech will always be home in the Bay Area. You know, I think that's where all the capital is still centralized, you know, in Silicon Valley from a venture capital perspective.
Yeah.
New York is the next biggest market.
Yeah.
You know, for us, we think New York's growing faster. There's a lot of also asymmetry with supply and demand in New York. There's more founders than investors, you know, for sure, in New York. And, you know, in Silicon Valley, you still have hundreds of VCs.
Yeah.
New York, it does not have anywhere near the same supply. And I think they have similar demand from founders in both markets. So we think there's much more significant opportunities in New York. But, you know, post-COVID, I think a lot of these companies are all remote first. You know, they don't necessarily have headquarters, especially in verticals like crypto. You know, I did a bunch of calls today meeting new crypto teams, and you know, one guy's in Berlin, one guy's in San Francisco, one girl is in London. Like, these are fully remote teams. A lot of these teams have never even met in real life. They will never have an office. And you know, they're working incredibly efficiently and productively. So I think that's kind of the new normal. But we are geographically agnostic. I mean, 3 of the 4 partners live in New York. We're very bullish on New York, but we'll do an investment anywhere.
Yeah, I think I read in your bio that we might see you walking with your dogs or, you know, in Central Park. And I thought, well, I haven't seen him there yet, but maybe I just haven't been there at the right time.
Right. Yeah.
But anyhow, so what about, do you think that the VC landscape ever is going to change? Because, you know, it's California, New York, Boston, right? More than two thirds of the deals and investments. Is that ever going to change in this country, or is it just going to, I mean, Austin's crept in, Miami's crept in a little bit. Are we moving toward, you know, more balance?
Yeah, I think I saw a stat somewhere that 60 cities in the United States have birthed unicorns. So I think that's a function of, for example, our last deal that we're closing in on, not done yet, is a company based in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And
what sector is that in?
this is in the dev tool sector for robotics developers.
Okay.
And so one of the founders is an adjunct at Carnegie Mellon, incredible school, incredible robotics talent, incredible engineering talent.
Sure.
But like every city, like for example, Pittsburgh can point to one or two like huge success stories, right? There's like a decacorn or a unicorn in pretty much every one of these major cities.
Right.
And I think it's just a function of that snowball effect where the early team at those startups, after the company goes public and after they monetize, they end up reinvesting in those neighborhoods, in that exact community.
Right.
And they start the next companies and they fund the next entrepreneurs. And it's just a function of time. In New York, I moved here in 2005 from San Francisco. And for a very long time, DoubleClick was our largest acquisition. It was like a $2 or $3 billion acquisition. It was like the biggest acquisition for almost like 10 years. And now there's like a new $2 billion company being created almost every day. So the velocity has increased, but that's all it is like the more frequency and velocity of the companies, it's a self-perpetuating phenomenon. And I think it's happening all over the world, certainly all over the United States. Right.
So I agree. And there's someone on the line who points out that Pittsburgh has a great ed tech company called Duolingo, which went public just recently at a very nice valuation. But Pittsburgh is, I spent some time at Carnegie Mellon when doing some research during some of my road trips for my new book. And, everything was robotics or AI. So Duolingo came out of kind of nowhere in the ed tech space. But that the founder of that is through and through Carnegie Mellon. So I mean they have really a great educational network there for tech. But anyhow, there's other questions here. Christopher has a question about what kind of criteria you look for. You mentioned the founder is really important. What about other qualities that you look for in a startup? And
I mean, I think it's actually interesting. We put out a blog post 2 weeks ago on after reviewing kind of thousands of pitch decks over the past decade. What we think a great pitch deck looks like. And so we published it. If you go to eniac.vc on our blog, you can find it. Maybe I'll drop into the chat. But that'd be a good idea. Yeah, a lot of people say put the team slide last. We're very against it, because we look for the team. Like I said, 90% of our decision is the team, and so we want the team front and center. I just found it, so I'll drop it into the chat.
That's good. And one of the things I noticed is that you hired a writer from TechCrunch to do some of your social content, and I guess he's writing these blogs, huh?
Yeah, he's doing a great job. We're all participating. He's kind of synthesizing and publishing. So well, I think that's smart. Good for you, because journalists know how to synthesize. Well, actually, it's interesting. Journalists and VCs are very similar because we're basically, trying to find the truth and discover facts with like very limited information. And sort of like uncovering certain stones in diligence. We don't have the whole picture ever. And so we're gonna have to come to conclusions based on this limited kind of evidence. And they're very, very similar qualities. And there's no, it's not a coincidence that a ton of journalists are going into venture capital. By the way, some of the greatest venture capitalists of all time were journalists. Look at Mike Moritz from Sequoia.
I was definitely thinking of him. Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So, for now, he's he's doing a lot of incredible work, like on the content front with our blogs, and we have a video series called Eniac Extras on YouTube where we interview founders after big milestone events about their tough times. But hopefully, eventually, we'll make Anthony a good VC too if he wants to be. So.
Well, some of my former colleagues from Red Herring, they became VCs as well.
Yep.
Like Jason Ponton, who was the editor of Red Herring, he's now a VC
Yeah.
too.
I remember Red Herring.
Oh, I remember it well, too well. Yeah. Anyhow, what else would you, I wanted to ask you about your India experience too, because I saw in your bio that you had a number of investments in India, and you have this, you were a co-founder of what, India Internet Company or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you one story. We started Eniac 1 and India Internet Fund 1 around the same time.
Yeah.
2009, 2010. And actually it was the same core LP that kind of wrote the biggest check in Eniac 1 and actually funded India Internet Group. And, we did, I think, 15 investments out of the India Internet Group. And now Eniac has 5 funds, 150 investments, kind of 50 exits, combined market cap of, must be, I don't know, 30, 40 billion. And the India fund, doesn't have any zeros, but, a bunch of Series A's and B's, one company that probably will go public next year. Because as you mentioned, the India market right now is catching fire. But it's been very slow, like relative to the US. It's almost 20x kind of over the past 10 years, just from my data, like 20x lower. I still think it's an incredible market with incredible talent. But it takes longer, in terms of companies going public. The US has so many of these kind of financial instruments, especially this year, the SPAC and the direct listing. And, the government is definitely, and, China better than anybody, but, versus China and India, the US is extraordinarily lax in terms of the rules and regulations. China is probably on the other side, India is somewhere in the middle. And so I think because of that, the free market for tech has not really been able to, to rip like it has in the US. I mean, can you imagine starting a company like Uber in India, early days, like all the friction that even in the US, that was faced in India would not have gotten off the ground, and without, an analogy like Uber in the US, and then of course they had Ola car, and then obviously now Uber is very big in India. But anyway, my point is, I think that was a lot of the friction to why the market hasn't over the past 10 years really exploded. But I think we're seeing a lot of optimism right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's like the next big tech market, from a global perspective.
Oh, I agree. I think it has been a long time coming, and but now India is third in the terms of venture capital ranking, and so it's US, China, and then India. And India has a lot of advantages over China, which I think get overlooked too much. But I think the VCs are paying more attention to India and Southeast Asia these days because they're not doing China so much anymore. There's too much friction in China, too many limitations and blocks on investment flows. And so India seems a better bet, but I think India was coming up anyhow, slowly but surely. With the same types of business models that China had and that Silicon Valley had, were just being copied in India by very good entrepreneurs with that huge talent base in India. But now these startups, the Indian startups, they can go public in the US, right?
That's right. Yep.
And that's a change. That's a change.
Yeah. What was the amazing company that went public 2 weeks ago? Freshworks.
Oh yes, Freshworks.
And that was like such an incredible story. And that was Sequoia. India that did it. But that was, I think, the very first Indian tech company to go public on the NASDAQ.
Right. Well, let me see. Make my trip.
Yep.
Make my trip. Did that go on NASDAQ?
I'm not sure.
I think maybe it did.
Yeah.
Okay. So Hal Kelman wants to know, what is the name of that India company to go public next year?
Can't tell you.
Okay. Look, let's see. So this internet, the India internet, you're still investing from that?
No, my partner there is managing the companies. He's thinking about raising a second fund
Okay.
in this market. I think it's a good idea. But
Okay.
we're just like managing the investments.
Would you be involved with the new fund for India?
No, I mean, I obviously helped start it. But obviously all my energy has been in Eniac,
Right.
since we started it, especially since I left my last startup in 2013. I've been 100% Eniac, but obviously we'll advise him and try to get him to raise capital, and I'll probably become an LP in his fund.
Okay, that's good. So I do notice that you have a lot of activities now outside Eniac, like the Girls Who Code, and I'm noticing your hat, of course, Girls Code. Well, and I know that your wife has started that nonprofit organization, which is great, and she has the second nonprofit, something about moms. I forget the exact title, but help me out on
The Marshall Plan for Moms. Yep.
Marshall Plan for Moms. So you're working with her on those initiatives or not?
I'm working with her in the sense of like getting out of her way, basically.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. That's the only thing you can do to help my wife is just get out of her way. But yeah, no, these are all her initiatives. She maybe the influence that I might have played a small part in is, entrepreneurs obviously kind of rub off on each other. I think when people know that you're really like having fun with what you're doing, it's not work, you're kind of aligned with your passion and purpose, you kind of want to like quit your day job and like be an entrepreneur, focus on something you love. And so she was actually in finance, first in as a lawyer, and then at hedge funds in New York. And when we first started dating, obviously she would see the startups and things that I was creating, and so she's like, I'm going to leave this job, and I want to do something that I love, and that was politics, actually. And so she ran for Congress in 2010, ran again for office in 2013. We lost both those elections, but along the way, it's kind of an interesting parallel to like my failures as well early in my career. Along the way, she discovered, she's visiting schools on her campaign trail, that the computer labs were full of all boys and there were no girls. And she was like, we got to fix this problem. We can double our pipeline, engineering pipeline, and in particular the STEM pipeline that goes into incredible companies. And so let's create Girls Who Code. So she created it 10 years ago, and now it's one of the largest nonprofits, female-led nonprofits in the country by operating budget. And we have taught 500,000 girls, computer science, half of which, by the way, are at or below the poverty line. So, we're seeing incredible mobility, not just in skills, but in really socioeconomic mobility, where, a girl through Girls Who Code will get a full ride at MIT, is now at Google. It's not only her and her family, but her neighborhood that's being kind of uplifted, from her experience. So anyway, the only thing you can do is get out of her way. And so now her next movement is fighting for moms. She felt this pain point. We have 2 kids, and she felt this pain point very much in the pandemic, where mothers, the majority of kind of the folks that left the workforce were moms, right, who had to run the household during the pandemic. And she's fighting for them to kind of fight for their opportunity costs, help them get back into the workplace if they want to, help them get paid for the money they left on the table to come back home. And so she's super passionate about it. And, she's starting her next movement. It's called the Marshall Plan for Moms.
Oh, that's great. I think I read somewhere you called your wife a badass.
Yeah, she's
Badass.
that's a good
Badass
like summary. That's a good
Yeah.
like summary for
Yeah,
her.
I like your description of staying out of her way. So I think a few husbands should take note of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to share the screen and we're going to start winding down at this moment because it's getting late and there's a lot on the agenda coming up that I'd like to share. And so our next speaker is going to be, our next VC victim is going to be Jake C. from Stonebridge Ventures. He's also an entrepreneur turned venture capitalist. And he's going to be sharing what he's up to. He's from Silicon Valley. And then after that, we have a little bit of a diversion. We've got Michael Wolf coming on. He's got his new media tech outlook coming out. And I thought it would be interesting to get his take on what's happening in media and tech. So that'll be interesting. And then we also have Yana Suisa from Sinawave Ventures coming out November 10th. And then I'm saving the best for last, our November Hong Kong program. We're going to be having John Chambers as a keynote speaker. We're going to be debating about the best Asian tech hub, Hong Kong, Singapore, or whatever. And we'll have some founder pitches. So hopefully you'll all join in and join us online. You can check out what we're doing at our website, silicondragonventures.com. And finally, I would just really like to say thank you to Nihal for sharing his time and his energy and his passion and his interest with us, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for having me. Great to see you again, and hopefully IRL sometime soon.
Okay, excellent. Take care now. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.